Well, I am most delighted to welcome a male guest today, Ian Jefferies, accredited practitioner coach whose masterclass I had the good fortune to host for the International Association of Professional Coaches and Mentors. It's quite a mouthful. A few weeks ago. Ian is the founder and director of Young Minds Coaching, which provides training programs to parents, grandparents, school staff, and other people who support today's younger generations as they develop towards adulthood and the workplace. And I guess you agree with me that it sounds like a very worthy mission in the world we live in at the moment. But before we get into the topic, Ian, I would like to invite you to introduce yourself and maybe a little bit about what you do and especially why you do it before we get into the topic we've chosen for today.
Julie, thank you so much indeed. This is an honor to work with you. What about me? Well, it's a difficult one. Yes, I grew up like everybody else did. I've now got to the ripe old age of 68, so I am over 50. And I thoroughly enjoy my life. I thoroughly enjoy my life now.
Right.
This is my third career. Did I enjoy my first two? Well, I enjoyed my first one. It was in the Royal Navy for 25 years. I was a helicopter pilot. I was a warfare specialist. I learned a lot about managing, leadership, making decisions, and things like that, but also working with people, which I think is incredibly important. It wasn't a case of just giving orders.
Right.
It was a case of getting people to do what you wanted to do.
Right.
Or you wanted them to do. And in my flying life, I had a team of maintainers, and on which my life depended.
Right.
If they got it wrong, I could crash.
Mm.
So actually, you had to get on very well with your team. And indeed I did. I'm still here. My second career was rather sort of forced on me. I had to leave the Navy. I went into high street retail.
Okay.
I look back on that as stress. I'm now a coach. I love this. I love helping people. And particularly, I love helping the young to improve.
Right.
And that has become hugely important to me ever since I met one Raquel Leonello, who explained what she did as a school coach and produced some training. And I went to this in a big way. I have my own teenagers. I have my own grown-up children. That's another part of the story. But I also have my own grandchildren. Now, how would I do something better? Is what really has driven me. And I've learned that perhaps as a parent, I had little time for my children, not enough time for my children. As a grandparent, perhaps I have a bit more.
Yeah.
Or even as a parent, second time round,
Right.
I have more time for my children. And rather than the didactic, do this, do that, do the other, it's much more a case of subtlety and encouraging them to do it themselves without really me telling them.
Yes, exactly, which is the best thing of coaching, right? It's not telling,
Absolutely.
It's actually sparking the, aha, yes, I know what I now need to do in the other person. You know, I like very much what you've just said. First of all, the recreating and the fact that you've had three very different careers, but from each of them have taken something, you know, have really learned and become the person that you are today. And I also very much like what you're saying about the younger generations, because I also personally feel very much that this period of our years, you know, I call it fabulous after 50, it could be after 60, after 70, after 80. It's just, I happened to create this when I turned 50. So that's how I called it. But it's the idea that this segment, I do believe we are very much about giving back, about contributing, about, you know, giving sense to our own lives, as in, you know, being able to help others do it better. And I personally do feel for the younger generations. I mean, I guess maybe lots of parents look back and I think maybe had a simpler sort of life. I mean, the generations nowadays, there's a lot of things going on in the world which aren't very good. There's a lot of feelings of helplessness. There's a lot of everybody being very busy. You know, you've just said something very important about having more time the second way round, you know, and that we then really can be there. And I think there's a lot of value that we can bring to younger people from this generation. It's a bit, you know, the elders in, you know, some of the native groups, etc., where the elders are very much valued for their role in getting to the younger people, as in they're not as defensive as they might be to their parents. And that reminds me, My father always has this quote. It's from Lois Wise. You probably know it. If I had known how wonderful it would be to have grandchildren, I'd have had them first. So I thought it was a really good one. He's forever saying that to me. But indeed, so basically you specialize in coaching the younger minds, right?
Do I specialize? I regard myself rather as a sort of a general practitioner of coaching.
Right.
I don't particularly specialize. However, I do thoroughly enjoy working with the young because you can really see some benefits. I'll give you, for example,
Yes.
I've been working with a student who has recently completed their A-levels
Right.
in the United Kingdom, so they're sort of aged 18. I've been working with them for about 18 months, but perhaps I didn't need to work with them for so long. They came to me with a situation and said, I am a perfectionist. So I thought, okay, that's fine. And of course, perfectionism was leading to procrastination. Procrastination was leading to panic. And that's where everything fell down. So I thought, well, let's go back to basics. And we tackled perfectionism by working on the 80-20 rule. And that was saying that you can achieve 80% of the task in 20% of the time. Or there are other connotations, but it works about that way. And of course, what was happening was she was required to write an essay on a Friday evening for homework. So she had the entire weekend to do it, and it had to be handed in on the Monday. But because of the way her brain was working, it was saying, I'm not going to be able to start this if I don't think I can do a perfect job.
Right.
Well, we all know that no essay is perfect. And so therefore it got put off on Friday. It got worried about on Saturday. It got worried about still more. And here comes the stress, such that if she achieved writing any essay, it was a mess.
Yeah.
So what we agreed was that she would write the essay within a time on a Friday and leave it. And that was perhaps the hardest thing she had to do. And the following week, I caught up with her and she said, do you know what? I got better marks on that essay than I have done for a long time.
Right.
And so she was already underway. This was our first meeting.
Yeah.
Yet coaching, we'd cracked a solution. I guided her on that solution, but she undertook it. It was her decision. She made the shout of going to see her teacher, explaining what was going on, and all of that. And when it came round to the mock exams in January, she wasn't so excited about that she had done reasonably well in the mocks. She was much more excited that she'd actually done a whole 2-week exam period without having to be sent home for stress.
Right, right.
And that gave her the confidence to undertake her A-levels.
I mean, here we called it the grandparent's guide. I mean, would you say that, for example, a grandparent would have easier access to a younger person, so a child or a teen, as you call it, than, for example, their parents or even their teacher, who represent maybe a different form of authority? When I think about parenting, I remember my children during the adolescent years, it was very hard for me to get through to them. And I remember in some incidents, saying to school, I can't push this anymore. This mustn't be my role because it's also interfering with other things at home, other things which I believe are part of my role as a parent. So I would like to leave the scholar side to you. What help can we get? Who can help them cope with stress, etc.? Because my experience is often that in the teenage years, there's a bit of resistance to your parents, which there should be, right? You're developing your own identity by breaking away from what you've known so far, as in being an extension of your parents or whoever brings you up. So would you say that we have an easier access as a grandparent?
We have the opportunity for an easier access, yes.
Right.
Perhaps, let's throw in another old adage, shall we? Familiarity breeds contempt.
Right.
Right. And there you have the parent-child relationship.
Yes.
So
true.
If you are removed from that, you are in a better position to get alongside the young. And of course, coaching is all about the client, the stakeholder, call it what you will, being the subject matter expert. Even a 6-7-year-old is the subject matter expert in them.
Yes.
and the way they think
Yes.
and the way they learn. And that is important. So it's not a case of bringing them into our space. It's meeting them in their space. And that, I think, is one of the most important factors of coaching the young, is meeting them in their space.
And that's often not done as parents, is it? You know, we do tend to impose and think that our way is the right way and not maybe respect the different ways of going around things of somebody
Yep.
younger.
Hold up my hand here. Guilty.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Me too, very much so. I mean, I tried consciously because it was actually also, I was doing my coaching accreditation, etc., and all of that. This is going back, but my children were teenagers and all of that. So I was very much aware of this at the same time, yet I was finding it very hard to break from that pattern. So Ian, first of all, thank goodness for people like you. So anybody on this, listening to this or watching this on YouTube today, if you have any serious issues, you know, go and see a coach who can be that neutral person. But if we're talking about a guide for grandparents. So we're talking to people on the show today who are grandparents or maybe going to soon be grandparents. What would you tell them if we're talking about a guide? What should we do?
I wouldn't tell them anything.
Right.
If that was a trap to trick me up, then we're not going to fall into that one. I would not tell them anything. However, one can offer ideas, but it's up to them as to what they take. And I think one thing is to look at what they can offer their children in support of bringing up the children.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about the mental side of things. I'm not talking about running them to and from clubs and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That could be part of it. But what can you offer them? Because as you have already said, you know, the parent sometimes is too close. It is a very rare parent who isn't. And as I say, familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah.
With grandparents, you know, the other shout is you can always hand them back.
Yes. But doesn't that then, Ian, I'm just having a thought, doesn't that also have to do a bit with the feeling of responsibility? The parents, you know, we really want our children to get through school. We know how important it is for them to have diplomas. And maybe parents have a little bit of, you know, a step back. I want the child to be happy. I want the child to be fulfilled. Not so much this drive to try and push them in a certain direction, but to have maybe, first of all, also the time that you mentioned. I mean, one of the things which is the problem nowadays is these absolutely crazy lifestyles that we have and this constant social media. There's never, you know, just a moment of let me just sit on the floor and put a few blocks on top of each other for a few hours. There's always something else happening, or the phone rings, or you've got to answer this. And maybe grandparents, by the time you are a grandparent, and that's also what I talk about a lot on the show, is that we usually in this phase of our life, whether we're still working or not, still do have more time because we don't have that hands-on looking after the younger children. And as you say, the running to the soccer match and all of that. So that there is maybe some introspection also on our side on who we are and what we can give, and maybe more listening rather than telling, right?
Indeed.
So
and
I mean,
listening is important.
Yeah.
Very important. But to have the opportunity to support your children in the upbringing of the grandchildren is the opportunity to say, okay, now what would I have done differently if I was doing it now? And I'm sure many, if not all grandparents, looking at this situation, go through that very question. What would I have done differently?
Yes.
And I think this is where life experience comes into it. Now, one thing that's actually missing tremendously in the young at the moment is the life skills, the core life skills. You ask most businesses and about the new workforce, and they say, but they're lacking communication skills, they're lacking tolerance, they're lacking resilience. Now, are those the things of the past? Arguably, yes. But should they be also the things of the present and the things of the future? Again, perhaps yes, because if the world is to go forward as we adults would like it to, after all, somebody's got to pay our pensions. If we adults are going to go, the world is going to go forward the way we senior adults would like it to, or even any adults, we need to ensure that our children are not only educated and I use a small e on that one, is not just academics,
Yeah.
but educated in the core, in the core life skills, that they are prepared for adulthood. They're prepared for work. They're prepared for even today. Forget about tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of what we do in the training is just that. I mean, if we can do it in a coaching way, which of course is non-judgmental, it's adviceless. I'll come back to that in a minute as well. It's non-stigmatic. These are the things. I mean, many senior people, be it in sport, be it in business, have coaches.
Yes.
And what is the problem with a child having a coach? There is no problem at all.
Yeah.
But if it's a coach who's actually asking the open questions, encouraging them to think for themselves, encouraging to look at a text perhaps and say, what's going on here? There's something more in this text than actually meets the eye, then perhaps we're going to get somewhere. If you look at a text and you suddenly say, Juliet has left me, that's not what Juliet meant at all. But the way the text read to the other person was just that. But it's a case of stepping back from it and just giving it that time to say, what's going on here?
So basically, grandparents have a crucial role today, more than maybe ever before.
Yes, because they've got that world experience and the time to ask those questions and just perhaps encourage that thought process.
And also maybe in a way, the gap is smaller than it was before. I think before, your grandparents might have been, really retired as in doing nothing. The modern grandparent is often still somebody very active, who's still, aware of what's going on in society. We're not talking about some recluse, now with internet and with everything, where we stay up to date as much as possible. So it's not that we're not in tune with today's world, but I think we are, but that we are still very much aware of, as you say, the untaught topics. Those things that you talked about, resilience, generosity, empathy, the idea of a team. I have the feeling that nowadays it's very individualistic. And all those things, it's not right or it's not wrong. But if we want to look at the bigger picture of where the world would go, these human skills will always be needed.
Absolutely. Incredibly so. But whose responsibility are they to produce in the young?
Yeah.
Now, you look at society these days, and as we've already remarked, the amount of time that parents have is diminishing.
Yeah.
Everything is moving at the speed of communication, and communication is moving incredibly fast, almost instantaneous. The difficulty is there's so much out there. It's now a case of identifying what needs to be done. Look at the priorities.
And also the access, I was just thinking, sorry for interrupting you, I was thinking also the access of what the children, can have hold of is so much more than before. They're bombarded with all sorts of things which, in our generation, we didn't have access to, because we didn't have the internet out there where you could have, violent games and sex, or, that you don't have a clue what it means anymore. And if there's no one there that they can actually talk to without feeling ridiculed, without feeling that people are going to laugh at them or refuse to answer the topic, how are they going to make the par between what they hear, whether it's fake news, whether it's, a certain sort of news? Everything seems mainstream now, whereas it's not. Somebody has to be there to guide.
Well, indeed. And you just hit on a very, very important thing, and that is fake news.
Yeah.
And it's identification of what is real, what is fake.
Yeah.
And these youngsters are going to have to deal with that without any experience. They haven't yet developed their sixth sense of saying, this doesn't sound right to me. But yet that's going to have to be a key skill that's going to have to be brought in early. And who better than the older generation to bring it in, because they have developed that sense. They may have prioritize their time. They may be very busy people, but they've looked again at their priorities in life and said, what is actually more important? Getting involved in the local village club or looking after my grandchildren?
Right.
And if there is a priority that's got to be taken on there, they are more likely to go for family first.
Right. And
which
it
is
doesn't
fine.
even matter where you are, right? Because I mean, we're talking about a very international audience. So, for example, my children grew up far from their grandparents. We lived in Cameroon, in Uganda, in Senegal, But however, nowadays, that's where we can use, all the good sides of the social media. It's about
Indeed.
creating a connection, isn't it? It can be a
Yes.
Zoom call. It can be a telephone call. It can be just by WhatsApp that the child feels that they can ask a question that maybe has been bothering them and that they know that they're going to get an open, honest answer back.
Rapport development
Yeah.
is a key. It is perhaps one of the things that a grandparent can really do is to fill that rapport gap,
Yeah.
particularly in the earlier ages,
Yeah.
because as they grow and develop, they get more experience. They know how to handle their parents and things like that. It can get easier, and a lot of times it can get very easy, and other times it gets absolutely contentious.
Right. And it
But
is a role model, right? I think very much when you grow up and you're a teenager or a young person, you're not 100% sure yet about who you are. And that's when you need the role models. And that's also the huge influence of peers, let's say, in their groups, because they feel more understood. Whereas I think that the modern grandparent nowadays can give that, not as a grandparent, but as somebody who's still in society, as in not this croaking dinosaur who doesn't understand what's going on anymore, but who has the knowledge and the understanding of what it is, but who is entirely open to whatever the child is saying and feeling, and non-judgmental. I mean, that's the big problem, I think, with parents, is that we're a little bit too fast, and I love that what you said about a second chance, because I mean, all of us, once we get to a certain phase, that we're out of that panic craziness of child rearing, and of course our children ourselves, as they grow older, will come, as we all do, with a whole list of what we should have done differently, etc. And it does give us, in a way, a second chance to be there.
yes, it does. And if we can help our children in order to run their family and put in that gap,
right,
without being fully imposed upon, it's
yes,
like everything, it's a very subtle dividing line.
yes,
But it's not something that has to be done as, right, we're going to have a coaching system now, we're going
no,
to have
right,
a coaching thing.
exactly,
It's just got to be an informal, natural rapport.
exactly.
And I think the youngsters, because they won't see their grandparents perhaps quite so much as their parents, are more ready to see them as somebody set apart.
Yes.
And therefore, perhaps if they've got a problem or something like that, they can find it easier.
And that is very unique. That is
particularly
very
if
unique.
they've developed rapport. Yeah.
And as you were saying, we're being there for our children indirectly, but I would say even bigger than that, we're being there for society and the world, full stop. One person at a time, helping them to make sense, using all the technical things and all the fast paced and all of that, but with the values of a human being. Now, Ian, we're approaching the end. What about 3 tips? You call this the guide. Do you actually have a book? No. Maybe you should.
Yeah, writing and me don't actually see eye to eye.
You just provide the content. Somebody else can write it for you. I'll write it for you. Anyway, that's another topic.
Yeah, well, that's another topic.
Right.
Now, 3 tips. I think that is incredibly difficult, because it actually offers up just do this, do that, do the other. And everybody is unique. That's one of the paradoxes of life. We all share something in common. We're all unique. And so everybody's going to look at this in a different way and look at their strengths and look at how best they can support. It may be supporting their children, before even grandchildren come along. That's the important thing. Because if you use a coaching technique of open questionings, of listening, being non-judgmental, it works, of course, just as well with adults. It can work just as well with your family members.
Or with anyone, to be honest, with your co-worker, with your landlord, with whoever you're communicating with.
Yeah. So I think, if there's a tip, it's to develop those coaching skills
Right, so it's
which
listening,
don't
you
have,
said, first of all, right? So really
it's
open
really
listening.
really listening.
And then open questions, let's define this. This is not a coach-only audience.
Open questions which don't give a one-word answer, effectively. And I'm not just going to say yes or no, because you can say, well, how many children have you got? And the conversation becomes 2.
Yes.
Stop.
Right.
That's not quite what I meant.
So they're questions which literally open a conversation, and they usually start with certain words, right?
What, where, how, which. Avoid why, because people can tend to say you're being judgmental here.
Yeah, it can be
asking me why. Right? Yeah, it can be a bit aggressive. Yeah. When? Yes. That's always a classic. You know, when are you going to do this? Yeah. But how many is obviously a closed question. Yeah. Do you want to is a classic. Yes, no answer. Yeah,
and it doesn't go anywhere, right? It
doesn't go anywhere. Because coaching is designed to open that mind up a bit. To get them to really search inside them for their own solutions. Now, I said I was going to come back to this. This is about the children. To be a pure coach with a child is incredibly difficult, unless you've got all the time in the world. Because if you are going to be adviceless, then the children don't have the experience to be able to answer perhaps the question that they're being asked. Yes. And so perhaps there needs to be a little bit of input here, of mentoring, of bringing in experience. But I will always encourage people to leave the solution to the child concerned. Unless, of course,
so you're not saying do this. Like you could maybe say, can I share with you something which happened to me? And then it's a suggestion, right? It's
make a suggestion. Say, well, look, what can you do in this sort of situation? I'll give you a couple of ideas to start you off. You could do this. You could do that. How many ideas? You know, what ideas have you got to add to it?
Yeah, these are fantastic. And these are tips. These are tips. I'm hearing you say, you know, make time, listen, be non-judgmental, be curious, ask open questions. So questions which invite the child or teenager to develop more, and to really just create that rapport where the child or teenager feels that they can come with whatever's bothering them. Now, Ian, before we finish off, where can people get hold of you if they want to find out more about what you do?
Right, in a number of different ways, I suppose. I have a website, Young Minds Coaching. It's called Young Minds Coaching. It's a community interest company. We're a non-profit, but I also work as the master distributor for the United Kingdom and Ireland for Noble Manhattan Coaching, which you can look up on the internet, no problems. You will find Noble Manhattan Coaching. You will find Young Minds Coaching. Okay. And perhaps that's the best way in. The
best way to get it. Noble Manhattan Coaching, I'm all about it. That's my alma mater too. I graduated in 2009. So there we are. There we are. Something in common as well. Ian, thank you very much for that. I hope that in this way we have inspired the audience to, first of all, give some thought to the role a grandparent could choose to play, to how one could contribute to our children and indirectly our grandchildren and to society by being there as a grandparent, and about this mentoring role as well, which is there, especially in today's very fast-paced life, where there isn't maybe the opportunity to learn the human skills that we used to have before. And it is a crucial role to play. I think it's a very fulfilling role to play. So if you want to know more about coaching, if you want to know more about coaching young minds, I invite you to look up Young Minds Coaching, as Ian has just said. And I hope you take these tips. I hope you decide to implement them. I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would be delighted to have a review on iTunes as well. And let's continue to make the world that little bit better, one person at a time. Thank you very much, and speak to you again this time next week. Ian, thank you very much for sharing with us here today.
Thank you, Julie, for the opportunity.